The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting groups. If you'd like to produce a show, call us at 260-421-1250.
I'm Dr. Rudy Cashman, neurosurgeon, Fort Wayne, Indiana, for 41 years, but I'm only 39 years old. Tonight, we're going to cover a very interesting subject because vascular disease is extremely prominent in the United States, and the good news is that it's preventable, stoppable, and reversible. That's what this talk tonight is going to be all about. It's based on a lot of medical literature, my own experience. I teach the non-diet. What I'll be teaching you tonight is a way of eating. I'm not going to ask you to eat a diet, just to eat different food. And I've done a previous show on this, but this is going to be a series of 5 different DVDs, from reversing type 2 diabetes to vascular disease to obesity to high blood pressure. This will be very interesting and extremely important to your health. If you've been diagnosed with vascular disease, there's great news for you. And I will review the literature on it, my own books, and books of other very famous authors, authorities, and I'll bring these up throughout the lecture. And the important thing to remember is what I'm teaching is not a diet. It's just a way of eating. I've written 5 books on it so far. One is on psychology of eating, another one on motivating yourself to wellness, then the secret of the non-diet for children, and one on the secret of the non-diet for adults, and then reversing type 2 diabetes in 60 days, 90% of the time. When I think about it, the number of patients that I see every day in my practice as a neurosurgeon, you can see my motivation. You can see my motivation. I just will not allow these patients to become sick. I devote my life and my practice at my age 39 here to reverse and stop and prevent this condition. The 5 books I wrote, I call them the Magic 5. And what I'm really speaking about is curing the disease. If you have an angioplasty or a heart operation, or they clean your artery out, or clean out the arteries in your legs, it's a quick fix. It's a quick fix. And it's not curing the disease. You will not believe it, but our body has in it 100,000 miles of blood vessels. With your blood vessels, you could go around the earth 4 times. If you stretch them out, you'd be halfway to the moon. Yet what do we do to treat them? We're working on little areas, cleaning out the artery in the neck. There's 100,000 other miles of blood vessels in your body. That's fine to do that. It may save you from a stroke. But we need to attack the rest of the vasculature by teaching you proper way of eating or with medication, combination of the both to help you and prevent this condition. What is vascular disease? It's atherosclerosis of your blood vessels. That's where the deposits of fats and cholesterol inside your arteries, that closes them off totally or partially. It can occur throughout the body, in the brain, in the heart, in the legs, inside your organs. It's a diffuse disease. It's not just your carotid artery or just your coronary artery. It's throughout the body. and it's deposits of cholesterol, good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, that closes off your blood vessels. And it can involve strokes, involves heart attacks. It can eventually cause amputations. It can cause you to become blind. It can cause you to lose organs like your kidneys. And it is an extremely common disease. It's an American disease. It's a diet disease. Vascular disease is largely a diet disease. It's not found very much in many countries who follow a different way of eating than we do. What type of people are more likely to have this illness? What are the symptoms and the signs? For example, there's an entity called metabolic syndrome. Dr. Raven invented the name, and this helps identify who would be more likely to have vascular disease or diabetes. About 50 million people in this nation have metabolic syndrome. What's a characteristic of it? Obesity, increased abdominal girth, pear shape, apple shape, high blood pressure, high LDL, the lousy cholesterol, low HDL, the heavenly or the good cholesterol, the high density cholesterol is low. Insulin resistance, which I would explain to you a little bit what that really is, the cause of type 2 diabetes. Insulin resistance is really the core of metabolic syndrome. And if you have 2 or 3 of these factors of hypertension or elevated cholesterol, insulin resistance, you have metabolic syndrome. Half of people with metabolic syndrome will get type 2 diabetes, and type 2 diabetes is what? It's a vascular disease. It's a blood vessel disease. It's very, if I see a patient come to see me and they're looking for back surgery and they have a lot of degenerative disc disease and they're overweight, a majority of them, frankly, when I check their blood pressure, invariably is elevated. They're obese, their blood figures are going to be off, so they have metabolic syndrome. And I point this out to them. Many of them do not know they have it. It's undiagnosed in many people. So have a look in the mirror, weigh yourself, take your blood pressure, check your blood figures. You may have metabolic syndrome, which is indicative of future disease, of diabetes and vascular disease and strokes and heart attacks. And you want to correct it. So you need to get diagnosed. What's the incidence of vascular disease? Is there a difference in ethnic groups or racial groups? Is there a difference between men and women, for example? Yes, there's a lot of difference. Majority of it's caused, of course, by what we eat. But there is a difference in ethnic groups and racial groups, partly because of their genetic structure. Through evolution, the people that lived are the ones that could chase an animal, catch it, eat the whole thing, become fat, and they'd eat again for a month. They were selected through evolution. And those genes are expressed by what we eat. For example, if you take South American, Japanese, Asian, Micronesians, or blacks from Africa, they have a lot of them have in them what's called the thrifty gene. It's the gene that saved them years ago. It's still in them. If they were in Africa, they eat the right food, mainly vegetarian way of eating, they don't get hypertension. They don't have strokes. They don't have heart attacks. In Kenya in 1954, they could barely find a heart attack or stroke victim to show the medical students. But yet, you take the same group of people, put them in Washington, D.C., like when I was there during the Vietnam War, being the main neurosurgeon at the Washington National Hospital. Now, hypertension that I saw in the inner city population was unbelievable. 300 over 200. Brain hemorrhages, I would operate almost 2 a day. What was that due to? The food they were eating, the type of food that we're eating. And that ethnic problem is still present today. 2/3 of the people in the United States are overweight. 1/3 is obese. But certain ethnic and racial group, it's much higher than that. Certain racial and ethnic groups, it's almost 90% of serious obesity. Of course, all of them will get diabetes, hypertension, vascular disease. I ain't trying to prevent this. Is there a difference between men and women? Yes, because estrogen has somewhat of a protective effect of avoiding vascular disease. Women, for example, their heart attack rate is a great deal lower than men till age 60 or so, and they're the same. Then they are the same as men. Males have about 5 times the rate of heart attacks before age 60. And hypertension, of course, is a big cause of vascular disease. High blood pressure is a cause of vascular disease. Type 2 diabetes is a cause of vascular disease. But it's largely a diet disease. 90% of vascular disease is a diet disease. So it is with proper way of eating that we can prevent, reverse, and stop the disease. Ask yourself, am I of normal weight? Look at your body mass index. You can look at a table. And you can read my books or pull it up on the computer and see if you have a proper body mass index. Do you look like an apple or a pear? Abdominal fat is a lot more dangerous than fat around the hips. So a pear is a little more safe than an apple shape. Is very dangerous because the fat in the abdomen is inside the peritoneal cavity. It's not under the skin. It's deeper than that, bathing your organs, and you're much likely to have vascular disease, type 2 diabetes, higher rates of cancer. Yes, obesity leads to cancer. If you, for example, we could cut breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, probably 40 to 50% if we ate a proper micronutrient diet and get our weight down. Absolutely. I talk to many women. They have no idea they could cut the rate of breast cancer good 40% if they get of normal weight. A critical factor. Repeatedly do I ask them, what are the 10 top markers of vascular disease? What are the 10 things that are much more likely for you to develop vascular disease, atherosclerosis throughout your body? Elevated cholesterol is one. If it's the Framingham Heart Study, proved for 50 years that if your cholesterol is under 150, your odds of heart attack, zero. I mean, can you believe that? So your cholesterol is very important. We have the LDL, the low density cholesterol. By low density means that there's a lot of fat, just a little bit of protein. Protein is needed to transport fat through the blood system. Fat does not dissolve in blood. So LDL is the bad cholesterol. That's the one that goes through the intima layer that lines the inner lining of your blood vessels. It's only one cell layer thick, but that's your protective layer. And the lousy cholesterol can get through that layer if the artery has been injured, deposits inside the vessel wall, inside the intima, the muscular area, and atherosclerosis occurs, plaques developed. And white blood cells, your own immunity attacks the area, and also that adds to the deposits. And that's what plaques are made from. They are the things that grow inside your blood vessels, what you're trying to avoid. And there are other forms of cholesterol also, but the main one, let's talk about LDL, the lousy one. HDL is the good one. The high density or heavenly cholesterol is the one that goes through the arterial system and will help repair the arteries, will clean out some of the deposits that have occurred. The triglycerides and the cholesterol deposits in your blood vessel will clean them out. So to have a good HDL is important. Women tend to have naturally a higher one, and usually around 50 or so. With men, a normal would be 40. Women would be 50, would be a normal one. Number 2 under vascular markers is inflammatory factors. Inflammation actually is thought to be now, frankly, the main cause of vascular disease, even more important than cholesterol. So how do you measure inflammatory factors? CRP, C-reactive protein, very important. I see people with all normal blood figures, but their CRP is 8 or 9. Trouble. That's trouble. That has to be investigated. Very high chance, perhaps, that they have vascular disease that hasn't brought symptoms yet, and that needs to be studied. Need to check their blood factors. And inflammation can be caused by injury to the arteries. It can be caused by the food, be caused by the LDL, the lousy cholesterol. Steroids can do it, but elevated insulin can sure as heck do it, will cause inflammation. And before you are that type 2 diabetic with elevated blood sugar, most pre-diabetics, before the diagnosis is made, are running a high insulin level. I explained that to you a little bit why this is. And the insulin is destructive to the circulatory system. It will cause inflammation of the vascular system, and that is the reason a lot of future type 2 diabetics have high blood pressure. They're running high blood pressure. Every type 2 diabetic I see, every one of them has high blood pressure. And many of them have the hypertension before. And a lot of that is because they have narrowing of the arteries and are retaining salt, and the insulin causes inflammation of the vessels, retains sodium, and is destructive to the human body. We'll teach you later in this lecture about insulin resistance and prediabetes. We'll go into that more. Another marker is obesity. If you're overweight, you're much more likely to have vascular disease. Hypertension, high blood pressure, much more likely to have vascular disease because this is pounding on your blood vessels and injuring them. As soon as it injures the blood vessels, especially where they bifurcate or where they branch, guess what? LDL penetrates the injured vessel and plaques form. That's why plaques form at bifurcations or where blood vessels divide a lot more commonly. Another marker of vascular disease is type 2 diabetes. We have in this nation probably 35 million type 2 diabetics. We have now many children with type 2 diabetes. Yes, we have many children now with type 2 diabetes. It is so sad. We will probably double type 2 diabetic rate within a 10, 12-year period. It's doubled in 15-year period. It recently doubled, so it will double again. The cost in human health and in dollars, it will be astronomical. I am certain our country will not be able to afford it. And when I look at certain ethnic groups and racial groups where 80, 90% of the people are overweight, well, what do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen? They're going to get high blood pressure. They're going to get diabetes. They're going to get vascular disease. So it's very important to look in the mirror, to weigh yourself and say, wait a minute, I got a problem. I'm going to listen to Rudy's here and change my life and save myself from all these diseases and illnesses. Stress level has a lot to do with that. It's also a vascular marker. A pot belly is a sign of a stressed out individual. How come? Because stress causes secretion of steroids, of cortisol. And what does cortisol do? See, when you get stressed out, you feel like the tiger's running at you, and your blood pressure goes up and your pupils dilate, and you start eating more to raise your blood sugar. Fat breaks down to get your blood sugar up because you feel the tiger's running at you, but there is no tiger. You're sitting on the couch thinking stressed out things and eating potato chips. Where do you think that fat that you're eating is going to go? Potato chips are nothing but fat trays. They're fat trays. If you ever read how they're made, you wouldn't eat one. You just wouldn't do it. It's molasses and it's baked in, and it's nothing but a fat tray. And you're going to gain weight. You're going to have a pot belly. So a pot belly is a sign of a stressed out individual. In fat, some people look at it as a gland now. It's not a quiet little thing that sits there on your body. Fat has in it 20 nasty chemicals that cause inflammation, that cause diabetes, that cause cancer, that cause dementia. You know they're talking now about Alzheimer's disease being called diabetes type 3. That's scary. That's scary. Dementia, Alzheimer's disease is much more common, common in obese people and type 2 diabetics. So one way of preventing that is to get to a normal weight. In psychology is a vascular marker. Stress, people are under a great deal of stress because will have a high rate of vascular disease. Why? Again, the steroids being secreted. So let me speak a little bit now about the non-diet. That's the way of eating that I teach based on many famous books, my own books, and I've reviewed my books. I'll review the others in a little bit with you. Basically, it's the work of Dr. Esseltine, Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Bernard, Hans Deal, Dr. Furman, all very famous books, and I'll speak about more of them in detail in my own work. We're a little bit different. Every book's a little bit different, but basically what we are saying is that animal meat is not a health food. Full of cholesterol, full of fat, full of inflammatory factors, and that is really what's causing most of the vascular disease that we are looking at. Animal fat is not a good thing. Although in some of these ways of eating, which I've described 4 different ways, to eat fish a couple of days a week and maybe a little turkey or a little chicken once a week is okay. Depends on your situation. I mean, if you just had a heart attack and you've had 2 strokes and you've had angioplasties and the Grim Reaper is pointing at you, I think you better follow perhaps a vegan diet. But I'll describe these now. Vegetarian doesn't eat meat. He'll eat dairy. The trouble, though, it's a great diet. Seventh-day Adventists eat that way, not all of them, but largely. They live about 7 years longer than most of us. But part of that is, too, they obey the Sabbath. They relax on Saturday with the family. So it's not just totally what you eat. But a vegetarian, if he eats a lot of milk products, can raise, because it has a lot of fat in it, it can raise their cholesterol and have heart disease. I have a vegetarian friend. We checked his blood sugars, and they were elevated. So now he's cut out all the dairy products, and the blood sugars returned to normal. Now, I want you to know your blood sugars. It's very important. You need to know what your cholesterol is, what your CRP is, what your serum insulin is. That predates developing diabetes, something that's not checked very often. Your fasting blood sugar, maybe your HbA1c, which measures blood sugar over a few months. You need to know those figures. I don't care what age you are. If you're a teenager, you should know what your teenager is, because when does vascular disease begin? Age 4. Age 4. We'll speak more about that. That's a vegetarian way of eating. The second would be a vegan way of eating. You don't eat meat or dairy. Okay, if you have advanced disease, that's the way you should eat. That's the only way you're going to save your life. Flexitarian is the way I eat. I may eat fish a couple of days a week, maybe occasionally a piece of chicken. You say, well, chicken is a health food. 7 days a week I eat chicken. Let me tell you something. Dr. Furman would say, eating chicken is like having a cookie. Why is that? It has no nutrients in it. And this way of eating is really a nutrient-dense way of eating. The fourth way, now we talk about vegetarian, vegan, flexitarian, that's me, and I weigh 145 pounds. It works. I used to weigh more than that. It's a nutritarian. That's Dr. Furman's term. Pretty famous. His book was a New York Times bestseller list. Number 6 or 7, maybe a month ago. He's a friend of mine. I play tennis with him. And a very good book. It's about nutrient density. What are the nutrients? Minerals, vitamins, and phytochemicals. 25,000 phytochemicals. These foods are largely foods of color. Foods of color, although let's say a mushroom or an onion doesn't have color to it, and they're very healthy. They have in them the chemicals that do the metabolic activity of your body. Many of the chemicals in there are phenols and carotenes and isocyanates. These chemicals prevent cancer. They lead to good health. If you want to cut your breast cancer rate 40%, eat a lot of mushrooms, eat a lot of onions, and eat a lot of phytochemicals, you'll cut the breast cancer rate in half. I mean, we should scream this information out there, how important it is. So nutrient density is really what we are teaching here. Don't eat anything with a mother or face, okay? Put a little humor into it. Let me give you a formula. Health equals nutrient density. Now, I've told you what nutrient density is, okay? That's the vitamins, the minerals, the phytochemicals divided by calorie. Health equals nutrient density divided by calories. That's Dr. Furman's formula. What are the symptoms of heart attacks and strokes? I mean, let's review this here a minute. I think it's different in men and women. for example, in women, angina, which indicates ischemia, like a blood supply to the heart, is different than men. Frankly, in a woman, any pain between the umbilicus and the ears, both sides, can be angina. Yes. Don't go running to the doctor right now, but that's true. As a physician, I'm seeing patients, you have to pay attention. If they have some of the markers of vascular disease, and they have a pain even in the right arm, the right jaw, when in men it's the opposite, it can actually be vascular disease. So you have to pay attention. In a man, for example, it can be sternal pain, left side of the chest, can be a jaw, can be the ear, but it can be back pain, for example, thoracic back pain. In a woman, it can be either side. So it's very tricky as to what symptoms of a heart attack is. But remember too, 75% of chest pain is atypical. Stress. That's the most common cause of it. And you have to be careful that people don't go running off with you right away to angioplasties and heart surgeries, and when in reality, it's atypical chest pain. It's tough to determine that. You have to just trust that you have a thoughtful, educated cardiologist. Sometimes maybe even ask for a second opinion, especially if there's a history of a lot of mind-body illnesses. But let's face it, anybody can have a heart attack. And so you have to be trusting, but second opinions are needed sometimes because changes in arteries occur. You're 45 years old, you're a bit overweight, you're going to have some changes in your arteries because you have a chest pain. Is that proved that's the cause of your condition? Not necessarily. So it's kind of a tough business. What about symptoms of a stroke? They can be numbness in the face, arm, leg, could be the whole thing. Occasionally it can be both sides. If it's an artery at the base of the brain, you can be numb on your arms and legs. Dizziness is common. Loss of speech, missing a few words, pronouncing them incorrectly. Double vision can be signs of stroke. Paralysis could be just the legs, or it could be arms and legs, but much more common, it's one-sided loss of speech. Sometimes it's a transient ischemic attack. The thing comes and goes. Watch out for that because that can be a warning sign. You could have 2 or 3 years episode, and then you get a permanent stroke. So those things have to be investigated very quickly. Come to the emergency room, just like with a heart attack. Come to the emergency room. They have treatments now that can prevent your heart attack, that can prevent a stroke. So it's very important, especially if you have hypertension and known heart disease or abnormal blood work, and you have markers of vascular disease. You got to be very suspicious if you develop any of these symptoms. Know your blood work. We mentioned that already. Get your blood tests. Know your triglycerides, your HDL, your LDL, your CRP, your serum insulin, blood sugar, total cholesterol. Another one is total cholesterol HDL ratio. It should be 3.5 or under. But you take your total cholesterol and you divide it by your HDL. I want you to know that, any age. And if it's abnormal, check it every 3 months. Don't say, well, check it in a year. Don't accept that because we want to stop, prevent, and reverse this disease. Dr. Ornish, in his famous books, published, improved with angiograms that vascular disease is stoppable, preventable, and reversible. He has pictures in his books where he took angiograms before and after, and the vascular disease is gone. So don't accept just a pill or just a procedure. That's a treatment, fine. You need it, get it. But then cure your disease by start eating the 4 different ways that I mentioned, depending on how advanced your condition is. So that's curing it. That is curing the condition. And let's face it, soft drinks is nothing but liquor candy. If you get a soft drink, you got to look at the label. I like you to drink 8 glasses of water a day. It's important. I had a difficult time doing that, but that's very important. It flushes out the system is a very healthy thing to do. But look at the drinks. If it's got 35 grams of sugar, man, that's calories. That's times 4. So one drink, you got 120 calories here. And so look at the labels. Learn to read labels of what you're drinking and what you're eating. let's talk about the glycemic index. When I speak about the different ways of eating, vegetarian way, flexitarian, nutritarian way of eating, and what am I really talking about? I'm talking about eating complex carbohydrates. I'll tell you in a minute what they are. Whole grain, 100% whole grain, not 10%, partial whole grain, 100% whole grain. You don't want to eat refined food where the fiber, the bran, the germ, has been stripped of the kernel, and now you're eating pure sugar. The fiber protects you and keeps you from absorbing all the food that you're eating, and a lot of it will go out in your stool. So calories in does not equal calories out, because if you have a lot of fiber, you will not absorb all those calories, and you can eat a lot more food if you're eating high fiber food, which is complex sugars that prevent the absorption of all the cholesterol and all the fats, just go out in your stool. Now, the glycemic index was formed to measure how quickly your blood sugar rises, okay? And it's 0 to 100. There's a website called glycemicindex.com. Become familiar with it, look at it, or you can read it in my books. It gives you examples. A bean, for example, is 20, has a count of 20 on the glycemic index. Why is that? It has a lot of fiber in it. It will cause slow rises in blood sugar. So for a diabetic, a bean's a good thing. I had a patient tell me the other day that his doctor said bean is bad for type 2 diabetes. That's totally ridiculous. Type 2 diabetics should be eating a lot of beans. And if you're following this way of eating, I teach a nutrient-dense way to have a 5-bean soup in the evening with a salad. Is a great dinner. What's white bread? That's 20. That has like a 90 on the glycemic index. That's a food you don't want. Why don't you want to eat white rice or white bread? It's high in the glycemic index because a rapid rise of blood sugar, and then the blood sugar drops. Now you're hungry, now you want to eat more. In other words, you're eating the mad, sad, toxic American diet. Americans in general eat 65% processed food. What's processed food? Food has been stripped of their fiber. Okay? Now it's nothing but pure sugar. Then they eat 25% meat, which is full of fat and triglycerides, and maybe 10% healthy food. Americans in general eating the mad, sad, toxic American diet, the worst in the world. We lead the world in vascular disease, in diabetes, and in cancer because we're eating the wrong food. But remember, I said it's stoppable, reversible, preventable if you eat the nutrient-dense way of eating. Vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, plants, beans, fruits, all you can eat. I don't recommend even counting calories. I don't even recommend practicing portion control. If you eat high-dense nutrient food, they'll turn your appetite off. If you're eating the mad, sad, toxic American diet, it doesn't turn your appetite off. That's really the point. And let's talk about smoking a little bit. And I see a lot of complications of smoking. Am I a lung doctor? No. A lot of lung cancer spreads to the brain, so I see it quite commonly. It'll spread to the brain. So smoking, lung cancer is what we connect to smoking, where the smoking 25, 30 years back causes genetic changes in your body that result in cancer many years later, sometimes sooner, but many times years later. But the most immediate, the most common complication of smoking actually is strokes and heart attacks. It's not cancer. Of course, it destroys your lungs. It has about 10,000 nasty chemicals in it. So to stop smoking is a critical thing. And nicotine causes constriction of the blood vessels, causes spasms. So if you have vascular disease, not uncommon for a smoker to just grab his chest and they die from vascular disease. Also, it oxidizes or is rusting the LDL, the lousy cholesterol, and when it injures the blood vessels through vasoconstriction, the LDL gets inside the blood vessel, goes through the intima, remember that one cell layer, damages it, goes inside the muscular layer and deposits cholesterol. So nicotine will indeed cause atherosclerosis and vasospasm, and who knows what those other nasty chemicals are doing to you. So stopping smoking to avoid vascular disease is just critical. Let's talk a minute here about the psychology of eating. Food's a drug. It is Americans' drug of choice. The drug of choice for Americans is food. That's a drug of choice. It affects our psychology. Why does it do that? It's dopamine. It's dopamine. And when you look at certain ethnic, racial, poverty groups, you can see that they have tremendous rates of obesity. Why is that? Eating. It's their dopamine. It's their cocaine. If it makes them feel good. I do it myself, although I generally watch carefully what I eat. But a couple of weeks ago, I had a very stressful day, number of operations, the office. I was on call, had 2 more operations through the night, had 3 more operations in the daytime. And I tell you, I cleaned out the icebox of every refrigerator in the doctor's lounge at Lutheran and Parkview Hospital. I had no control. That's dynorphin. When dynorphin gets weak in the body, you just grab anything, get your hands on, no thought process. But when the majority of the time, I'm pretty much in control. So it's about dopamine. It's the quickest way to feel good is to eat something. We all know that. A glass of wine even speeds it up more because it's absorbed more rapidly. And once the food breaks down, it secretes serotonin, and we feel a little better a few hours later. And then later on comes endorphins, our own morphine. We feel better yet. And if we have too many drinks and we have a big dessert, you can see where the problem is heading. So food is a drug. Food is a drug. It's the legal cocaine. It's the legal cocaine. It makes us feel better. So to break habits of overeating is very important. Dr. Ornish will talk a lot about love and intimacy and giving a hug and family. But when I look around, for example, I saw 5 patients today, 5 people from the same family in the office, and they were all overweight. So it's a family structure too. This is what they use to make themselves feel good. It's understandable, but to change the cycle of eating, it's something that must be, the psychology of it has to be considered. It's a very important thing. You know, one thing that's helpful, most of us such a hurry, we don't really look at the food. Do I look at the food when I'm working and eating, for Pete's sake? Maybe I'm now at Lufen's at lunchtime because they got half the doctor's lounge. We now have very healthy food. I mean, very healthy. It's all nutrient-dense food. Don't you kind of wonder who designed that? I'm not going to give you a clue, but you kind of wonder who designed it. A very cooperative dietitian over there. And it's all nutrient foods. And I must say, when I'm eating that food, I'm really looking at the beans and the beets and the onions and the mushrooms, just like I did today, and the nuts. Incidentally, I like an ounce of nuts. Dr. Furman recommends even 2 ounces of nuts because it has a lot of fiber in there. They're low fat, has some omega-3, the good fat. We're going to talk about omega-3, which is very good for healthy arteries, dilates the arteries. And we do need some fat. We need some essential fatty acids, but Americans eat 40% fat. We only need 4 to 6% to fulfill the essential fatty acids, which we have to get from the outside to enough fat for the membranes of our cells, for our hormones. So we do need a certain amount of fat in our diet, but it only needs to be about 10%. Oh yeah, it only needs to be about 10% actually. And we eat it. If you eat a nutrient-dense diet, you get 4 to 6% essential fatty acids. That's all you need. You don't need additional fat. But by looking at the food, looking at the beans, looking at the lettuce, looking at the onions, really look at it, you become mindful and more satisfying. And these phytochemicals secrete enzymes that will satisfy your appetite. If you eat in a nutrient-dense way, I know I've done it, then the appetite gets turned way down. You'll be eating a great deal less. The mad, sad, toxic American diet, we're eating of fat, salt, and sugar, increases the appetite because the sugar dives down quite quickly. What about alcohol? I mean, let's look at the basics a little bit. I mean, I'm not against having a glass of wine 3 days a week or something, but once you get above that, you're likely to drink more. I mean, alcohol, indeed, is a toxin. It destroys brain cells. When I see people who drink a lot and they get an MRI of the brain, guess what? It shrunk. You see all these spaces of spinal fluid where the brain shrunk. Oh yeah, every case. And I saw a lot of that when I worked at charity hospitals and stuff, where there's a lot of alcoholism, especially, I mean, the MRI scans. A lot of brain atrophy. It's toxic to the heart. It causes ventricular dysfunction. Heart failure rate goes up. It's toxic to the heart. It's toxic to the liver. You get cirrhosis. So alcohol, frankly, is a poison. But the resveratrol in wine, for example, which comes from the covering of the red grapes, is thought to be somewhat helpful and antioxidant, and in a point that I would generally agree with. But I don't suggest you drink a lot of alcohol. It's a toxin. And over a period of years, every drink of alcohol you take, a few brain cells die. We just happen to manufacture a few more every day, so it doesn't show up that much. But every drink of alcohol destroys a certain number of brain cells. It just adds up after a while. What about animal fat and protein? Animal protein has in it fat, triglycerides, and cholesterol. So eating animal fat is not to your benefit. When I see people putting down these big juicy steaks, what do you think is happening? They're painting their arteries. The whole vascular system, the 100,000 miles of vascular system in the body that day is being painted with LDL, and it's going to cause inflammation, some injury to the arteries. If you were to spin down the blood of a person after a high-fat meal, and it looks like olive oil. You say olive oil, oh, that's great stuff. Olive oil is 100% fat. And listen to this statistics. To have a tablespoonful of it and get some omega-3, it's fine. It has some monosaturated fat, and that's fairly good. It doesn't have a lot of saturated fat, but it's 100% oil. It's a high-fat meal, and it can be absorbed through your mucosa in your gut in 3 minutes. 3 minutes, oil you put in your salad is absorbed into the blood system. That's something I learned the other day. You wouldn't believe it. 3 minutes. While regular fat you eat takes about 4 hours. But if I had to put a needle in your belly, your buttocks, I can tell you what fat that you ate. They can do that today. So animal fat and protein, frankly, is an enemy. You want to prevent, stop, and reverse vascular disease, you can't be eating animal protein. You're kidding yourself if you do. But to have a little bit now and then, if you follow the 90% rule, 90% of the time you're eating the flexitarian way, or 80% of the time, and your weight has come down, and the Grim Reaper has not got his finger pointing at you, you'll survive that, and then it may just be fine. But if you've had heart attacks and strokes and you're in trouble, you can't be eating that way. You can't be eating that way. Let's talk about exercise a little bit. Of course, we all know exercise is a helpful thing, and I think very important, especially in the young people. You can't be raising a couch potato teenager sitting all day texting and watching TV all day and expecting to be a normal weight. It's a difficult thing. But what does exercise do for us? For one thing, burns calories. That's a good thing. Number two, it causes secretion of nitric acid which is in the lining of your endothelium, the inner layer of your blood vessel. And it relaxes the blood vessels. It secretes endorphins, your feel-good narcotic in your body, makes you feel better. It improves your CO2 max, your ability to utilize oxygen in your heart, and so it does that. And an easy way to lose weight, and generally I recommend people at least exercise 3-4 days a week, at least walk 30 minutes a day. If you're diabetic, you ought to be doing it twice a day to reverse, at least while you're reversing the disease. And I suggest some weight training. Every other day, some light weights, because muscles sitting on you will burn 50 calories a day doing nothing. You put a pound of muscle on there, it'll burn 50 calories a day doing nothing. It'll improve your ability to metabolize sugar, because it'll be metabolized in your musculature and turn into glycogen, which you use for energy. Incidentally, you have about 3 pounds of glycogen on you, and glycogen is made, has quite a bit of water in it. It's a reserve complex sugar. For example, I'm playing a tennis tournament, and I'm playing, say, 5 hours. I play a lot of tennis, and I get on the scale the next day, lost 10 pounds. My God, how could I have lost 10 pounds? Well, what happened was I lost my 3 pounds of glycogen, used it up as an energy, but each pound of glycogen has 3 pounds of water with it, so the figure the next day is totally false. I weighed myself again in a couple of days, and I lost only a pound or a pound and a half because of water. That's why the Atkins diet worked for a while. If you want to lose 10 pounds and you have a wedding next week, don't eat carbohydrates because you use up your glycogen in your muscles, and you lose 10 pounds. You pee out the rest of the water, and you have water loss, but then you get a tremendous appetite. You gain it back, so that's not a good way of eating. It's definitely not a good way of eating. I've read that in many books. But how can you measure your exercise level? A couple of ways. You can take 220 minus your age. That's the maximum you should get your pulse rate up to. But that's difficult to measure, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot of people with vascular disease are medication, and this medication affects the pulse rate. So it's a figure that's difficult to use. And I never seem to get up to my max of 145 or whatever. But I'm not on medication either. So, but I generally am in good shape because I play a lot of tennis, and I jump rope too. I jump rope and I do a little dancing. Yeah, I was in Dancing with the Stars, and I dance 15 minutes in the morning to some music, and it improves my balance, and it's a good workup. But another way is to take a treadmill test, and they measure what's called MET levels, metabolic equivalent of task, and they will have you run on the thing for a minute and then raise the grade in another minute, and you're hooked up to electrocardiogram, and there's a doctor there and a nurse there, and they see what you can get up to, and they can measure that. Walking, for example, you might have a MET level of 3 or 4. Playing tennis, dancing, you might have a MET level of 10. Now, if you have a MET level of 10 or so, odds of having a heart attack pretty low. And if you're above that, and you can train yourself to improve your MET levels. And it's quite important. But if you have a MET level of 3 to 6, watch out for a heart attack. But those are ways of measuring your metabolic reserve, your CO2 max, the amount of oxygen that you metabolize fairly easily. So treadmill tests are important. But then again, it's a test that maybe if that people get a little bit older, you have a lot of the markers of vascular disease, you need to get it, but it doesn't measure everything by a long shot. And let's talk about 5 good habits. You're talking about food, for example. No junk food in the house. Clear the junk food house. Number 2 is on Sunday night, maybe sit down and plan the meals of the week. Plan the meals for the week. Make some big soups if you're going to eat the nutrient-dense way. So you can use this soup for 3 or 4 days because you're busy working. That's a problem with some of these ways of eating. We got no time to eat. We're eating 50% of our meals in restaurants, and that's very bad. Don't eat regularly in restaurants if you get a problem. You're difficult to survive it. You have to be very picky as to what to eat in restaurants, and watch the drinks that you drink. You don't want a bunch of sugary drinks. And be mindful of your eating. So these are good health habits. But get the junk food out of the house. And 8 glasses of water is a good thing to drink. And plan for the meals on Sunday is a good thing. And limit eating out. Keep a food journal. Write down what you're eating for a while till it gets to be a habit. And maybe get some recipes of what are healthy foods. I'm putting together, I'm up to about a couple hundred recipes right now, I think. And let's talk about a minute about insulin resistance. I rarely meet a type 2 diabetic in the office. I say, did you know type 2 diabetes is a curable disease? You know how many patients have told me that they know it's a potentially curable disease? Maybe 1 or 2. It's pathetic. I mean, I just don't understand it. When we can't just be taking overweight people with type 2 diabetes and say, here's a medication, and say, well, lose 10 pounds of weight, see you later. No. That's not the way I deal with these people. No, I give them books to read, I give them CDs, I get DVDs, I get audio books, and I'll see them back in a month. I'm a neurosurgeon. Why do that? Well, partly because nobody else is doing it. And that's part of the reason, sad to say. And I have many patients I've eliminated type 2 diabetes, many. I have pictures of them on my cell phone. I mean, and they bring tears to my eyes. I mean, I walked in Starbucks the other day, a lady opens the door for me, and I said, no, honey, you go ahead. She says, no, doctor, I saw you on a TV program. I no longer have type 2 diabetes, and I just want to thank you. I mean, this is not uncommon for me, and I must say it makes me feel good. What's insulin resistance? So, okay, now I told you that hardly any type 2 diabetic knows it's a curable disease. Dr. House, franklinhouse.com, diabetesmiracles.com, published a book called The Diabetes Miracle. He's been doing it 30 years in Oklahoma. He feels he can eliminate type 2 diabetes 30 days. 30 days. An honest guy, I believe him. I've heard other people say it. I feel I use this 60 just to be different. But if you eat this 100%, this nutrient-dense way, 100%, matter of fact, you will have to watch very carefully about your blood sugars because they'll drop quickly. Dr. House will take your oral medication away first day. He'll cut the insulin level in half, in about a week. It'll drop quickly, so you need to check your sugars many times a day. You will need to watch it very carefully. You need to check in with your doctor. I'm not giving doctors advice, I'm giving you general principles. You need to be in contact with your doctor and look at the amount of money you'll save. Look at the health that you will save. Okay. Now, insulin resistance is, let me explain this to you. Now, I'd say, what's the cause of type 2 diabetes? Patients don't know. It's insulin resistance. It's insulin resistance. What's insulin resistance? They have no idea. Rarely do I meet a patient who has any idea what that is. That's the cause of it. I feel it's our obligation to tell the patient what it is. So I draw them a picture. We make about 60 cellular cells in our body. Okay? Every cell needs to make energy. So it's oxygen and sugar equals ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's our energy molecule, okay? Every cell has these little hairs sticking out called receptor sites. Now, for sugar to get in the cell, insulin has to pick up this sugar and transport it and touch one of these receptor sites that opens the door to the cell. Now, sugar is in there, combines with O2, forms ATP. That's your energy molecule. The trouble is, in a type 2 diabetic, that their fats in the blood are so high, it makes these receptors sticky. And insulin cannot transport sugar into the cell. That's insulin resistance. That's insulin resistance. Is that hard to understand? No. Never meet a patient that knows it. And it's kind of sad. I do not blame the patient. It's us providers that are not explaining this properly. And the problem is in the pre-diabetic state, okay? You have an overweight patient now, blood sugar is normal, but he's having trouble getting the sugar in. So what does the pancreas do? Secretes more insulin. So the insulin level is high in the blood. Remember I told you, get the serum insulin test? That's the reason right there, okay? But the insulin level is high, blood sugar is normal, but that's why many pre-diabetics die from a heart attack, unannounced heart attack. And the reason is the pancreas starts secreting more insulin to push sugar into the cell, but it cannot get the job done, and this insulin causes heart disease, vascular disease, dementia, cancer. So it's very critical to get that serum insulin. So to summarize today's talk here a little bit on vascular disease, it's stoppable, preventable, it's reversible. And I'd like you to pick 4 of the ways of eating, from the vegetarian to the vegan, to the flexitarian, to the nutritarian. There's no question if you have high advanced disease, you need to be at least a vegan or a high-dense nutritarian. You want to eat foods of color, complex carbohydrates that are on the glycemic index 50% or less, whole grain, okay, and eat some beans, okay, eat fruit. You could probably eat all of that you want, and you will lose weight. You will not gain weight. It's meat and cheese you need to avoid, and trans fatty acids like French fries, for example, not something that you want to eat. And remember, fiber is your friend. To eat high, dense fibrous foods. And fibrous foods, obviously, are the vegetables and the beans are very high in fiber. They line your gut and keep you from absorbing a lot of the nasty cholesterols and fats. So, and these phytochemical foods are great antioxidants because we have free radicals from all this food that we eat. There's many antioxidants in vegetables. Because these oxidants will destroy your blood vessels, cause dementia, etc. So I hope that you have now understood what we speak about, stopping, preventing vascular disease. It's critical to your life. Remember, a procedure is important. It can save your life. I'm not against any of that, but that is not curing your disease. You get 100,000 miles of blood vessels in your body, and they're bypassing a little area here. I mean, they're bypassing the problem, frankly, and it may save your life for a short period of time, but you still got vascular disease. What I'm talking about, getting rid of it. Get rid of the vascular disease. So I need for you to learn what nutrient density is all about by reading my books, or reading the books of Dr. Esseltine, who took 25 very ill cardiac patients at the Cleveland Clinic 25 years ago, and he teaches them how to eat correctly. And his diet is essentially what I'm teaching here. He's a little more radical. He's not too hot on nuts or avocados or things like that, but it's all about nutrient density. I've met him. I've been to his lectures, and those 25 people that the cardiovascular guys gave to him, he's a general surgeon, they're alive 25 years later. It works. It works. And he's obviously curing these people of their disease and reversing their disease. Today's food pyramid, in other words, is vegetables at the bottom, fruits at the bottom, beans next on the and a few nuts. Meat is the very top. Very rarely should we be eating meat. It's not a health food. And the main reason we need to eat this way, it is not in our evolutionary bodies to eat the nasty food that we're eating. It's too short a period of time. We started farming, 10,000 years ago? That's not enough time in evolution for our bodies to change. So thanks very much for listening. And our next DVD will be on reversing type 2 diabetes. That'll be number 3 in our series. Namaste. I love you all. Thank you very much.